$79.2 trillion US dollars. Do you have any comprehension of how big that is? In 2018, it's going to be roughly 81.97 trillion. In 2019, it's going to be 84.84 trillion. And we continue growing. Global GDP. It's been growing 3.5% for the last 6 years. But ask yourself this question. What if it was lower than that number next year? So everyone's expecting this number. What if it was lower? Well, who cares? The numbers are ridiculous. The numbers are just monstrous. And on top of that, if you're just smart and you know how to make money when GDP is expanding and how to make money when GDP is contracting, it doesn't matter. It's genuinely not a question of whether it goes up or down. It's just a question of whether you accept it's the best system. And if you want to participate or not. Guess what? If you make the choice every day not to participate, what do you think you get in return? Nothing. It's a meritocratic system. The real question, when you look at that number there, so 2018, 81.97 trillion. The real question is, how much do you want? If you want nothing, you will get nothing. Now, obviously, some people in the world don't have a choice. But you have the choice. You're lucky. You can choose to be part of it. You can choose how much you want. And when you've got it, you can choose what you want to do with it. And if you want to change the world with it, change the world. By just participating and making a better product or service, you're changing the world anyway. You're raising living standards. You're doing your part in the economy. And once you accept it, what will happen? You're going to engage with the system positively. And you'll figure out the advantages, disadvantages. You'll figure out what works, what doesn't, what it can do for you, and what you can do for it. But if you choose not to participate and stand around with placards with stupid signs on the placards, protesting all the time, that's you saying, I want nothing. And what's the system going to give you in return? Nothing. Because you produce nothing. Is it starting to sink in? What it comes down to, really, if you've never traveled and seen multiple systems that have failed and multiple systems that have succeeded, you really don't truly know and understand the system that you live in, whether it's successful or not. So if you're just sitting in this system thinking it's bad, but you've never traveled, how do you know it's bad? How do you know it's good? You don't have any perspective whatsoever. I would advise, when you meet people, one of the first conversations you should have with people is, how much have they traveled in their life? It will then give you an idea of who you're dealing with, if they're likely to offer anything of value and understanding and perspective on the world. If they haven't, that relationship is going to last a very short time, because they don't understand anything in the world. Well, you've got to seek out alternative education. Parents are also an issue. So if you're third, fourth, fifth, 10th generation, and your parents have 0 in their bank account, so you're third, fourth, fifth, 10th generation Western world, just think how long your family has been operating in the Western world and all the economic booms that have happened over the last 100, 200 years. And they've got 0. Well, it's the same thing as the teacher, right? If they're standing in front of you and telling you what you should be doing with your life, it's a joke. Back to school teachers. Obviously, the vast majority work in the public sector. But even if you've been to a private school, it's very, very unlikely that any of these people have had a modicum of success anywhere in their life. So in terms of financial education, they can't teach you anything because it simply can't provide that type of education because the people in the system have never done it. So either the teacher or the parent. So you have to remove yourself from the situation. Physically. So what did I do? I grew up in Liverpool. I think it's like 95% left wing. Very, very, in the 80s, very, very anti-capitalist, very anti-business. Massive bloated state, lots of welfare, dependency, drugs, crime. You just literally get on a train and you leave. You don't hang around. Don't fight what's around you. It's there, just accept it, get on a train and leave. Physically remove yourself. So just accept that it exists and seek out a better financial education because it's not going to be provided to you. That's one of the failures of the system. Okay, principle number 2, self-determination. So this one probably brought up the most questions in the comments section after the video went out over the last couple of years. Self-determination is the principle that underpins the 2 secrets of rent to own. So defining assets and liabilities properly and building and owning your own infrastructure. So in terms of financial education and financial understanding, an asset and a liability, understanding what a perceived asset actually is. So people actually perceive certain things as assets when they're actually liabilities. And even after the video went out, it's unbelievable how many people still don't get it. Because it really is just straight maths. And we use mortgages as the main example, okay? So let's start with a property, I don't know, somewhere down on this road. It's on the market for 3 million quid. If you get a mortgage, do you pay £3 million for that property? No. You pay a hell of a lot more. So I'm going to show you now why financially, why it's actually really dumb to have a mortgage. We can actually quantify, because the first thing that a mortgage takes from you is your freedom, because you have to pay it every month. And of course, I'm going to get onto the point in a second, but if you don't have a mortgage and you pay rent, you have to pay rent every month. Well, you don't. You can just leave. We'll get onto that in a second. So a mortgage takes your freedom. And right from the beginning, before you even sign the paper to take the mortgage, you can sit down and figure out what you value your freedom at that moment for the next 25, 30 years. With just a few assumptions. So let's use an example in the United States. Everyone knows the difference between a repayment and an interest-only mortgage. Do we know that? Most people should. If you don't know the difference between that, you need some help. A repayment mortgage, you're paying down the principal of the loan while you're paying the mortgage. Interest only, you're not. You're just paying the interest. So in the US, it's mostly repayment, vast majority, okay? In the UK now, it's about 50-50, repayment and interest-only mortgages that are outstanding in the economy. But we're going to use an example here, which is the best case scenario, which is a repayment mortgage, okay, in the US. So let's say you find a property that's 575 grand, and you put down a 75 grand deposit to buy the property. So you get a 500 grand mortgage. You sign all the papers, it's done. What do you own? Do you think you own that house? You own nothing. You own, over 30 years, a liability of 360 payments. That's what you own. If you miss one of those payments, the bank takes the property. So basically, when you're taking the mortgage, what you're actually saying is, I'm willing to forego my freedom on day one for a price of negative 133 grand. And you know going into it that you have 0% freedom over the 30 years because you have to make those monthly payments consecutively. And at the end of the 30 years, you can actually look back and say, well, what was my reward every year for 30 years? 9 grand, 9,700. If the property is worth $1 million. So if you want to be smart about this, go and do a spreadsheet and work out all of your break-evens and opportunity cost of capital and time and freedom. Maybe we'll make a spreadsheet like that and send it out one day. So in this scenario, if you believe you can make 10%, and by the way, 10% is easy if you've got a financial education and you know what you're doing, 10% is easy. There's so many products in the world that pay 10% for very little risk. That to me is like an ultra-conservative investment. So if you believe you can make 10% on your deposit, okay, and you decide to take the mortgage on the $575,000 property, you're basically speculating that the property will increase in value by 1.88 million over the 30 years. You're working for the bank, not for yourself, and you're going to have to work on that property for 30 years. That does, these numbers don't even assume that you've got all your costs and that you actually have to work. You're not going to be sitting on a beach just collecting rental income. Have we got any landlords here? I'm sure we have. When was the last time you didn't work on a property for a year? You're always on the phone. You're always talking shit to lawyers and accountants and real estate agents, and you're always working. You never stop. It's not passive income. That's a lie. Passive is when you sit on your ass, do nothing, and money just comes to you. If you want to sit on a beach and get passive income, buy a residential real estate investment trust that pays a 6 to 9% dividend per year. The landlord, by law, has to pay you 90% of the rental income that they collect. What do? They work. What have you done? You've provided the capital, and what are you doing? You're sitting on your ass on the beach drinking Mai Tais. They manage everything. It's truth that if you take a mortgage, you own a property. It's obviously not true. You own nothing. So renting to own. Very, very important for the principle of self-determination, okay? I would encourage everybody in your early years of life, rent first. Just totally maintain your freedom and buy for cash later, much further down the line, your dream life. Continue to maintain your freedom. In terms of self-determination, true self-determination means you are totally in control of your finances, not somebody else. Source their pension to a third party. So what did they not do? They didn't invest in themselves and build their own infrastructure. So this is another thing in the Western world that's in the capitalist system provided by public authorities as an infrastructure, as a solution to your problems. And it's a disadvantage. It hasn't worked. If it worked, then everyone would be retiring very wealthy and having very comfortable lives. But what does everyone do in the Western world when they retire? They have to sell their property, downgrade to a smaller property to release cash, release equity and pay off the mortgage. And then that's not enough. And then their kids have to top up their income. So you want to be the opposite of that. You want to be getting to retirement and going from your 4-bedroom house when you're 60 to buying a mansion because you're now retired and you can afford to buy a mansion. You don't go from your 4-bedroom property and downgrade to a 1-bedroom flat. But you don't know where the world's going to be when you retire. If you're 25, 35 now, why are you assuming that if you're in a problem, you're going to get some sort of support from the government in the future? What if it just disappears? Again, this is back to self-determination. You are totally at the whim of public authorities. And if they disappear and all the money disappears, all the welfare disappears, what are you going to be doing if you're short in your pension and you can't even live a basic standard of living? Like, you can't rely on these people. You can only rely on yourself. So, building your own infrastructure, you know, for you to get significant investments and savings. Of course, you can make money working for other people and corporations or whatever. But if you want explosive, significant money, you've got to build your own infrastructure and build your own businesses. and you reinvest the profits into investments that generate that return every year, the 10% plus return. And then it just compounds. And you'll realize when you get to certain levels, it starts off shallow, it gets a little bit steeper, and it takes time, and then it just goes exponential. So it takes time. So you just got to understand the numbers behind the compounding. And you'll get there quicker as well, obviously, if you work for yourself and you're successful in the business that you choose to be in. Freedom, what does that underpin? So these two secrets from the video: learning to value your time properly and ditching the smartphone. So you remember I was on the bridge, London Bridge, just staring at these humans walking like zombies into the office and walking back. And the reality is, you know, we've been through the mortgage example, whatever. They think they're squirreling away money and saving and putting it into an asset. But what they're actually doing is they're swapping their time for nothing in return. That's what they're doing. Because when they put their card in the ATM at the end of the month, the day before payday, it says 0. And they look back and they say, well, how many hours did I work last month? I don't know, it could be 200 hours, whatever. But you've worked 200 hours for nothing. So valuing your time is a central tenet of freedom. You need to learn how to value your time properly. If you work for a corporate or someone else, the reality is that you are not valuing your time yourself. Someone else is. It's the labor market that is valuing your time. And it's what they're willing to pay for your work. So you're not in control of it. There's no self-determination there, there's no freedom. You're going to the ATM every month and it says big fat 0, and you've worked hundreds of hours for it to say that. And your entire future is basically outsourced. You're living in servitude. You've got multiple bosses. You've got your corporate boss, you've got your bank boss, you've got your pension boss, you've got your central bank and government boss. Everything you do is out of your control. It means that you are valuing your time at 0, which means you value your freedom at 0. You're actually consciously making the decision, I want to be a slave. You're waking up every morning and saying, I want to do this. To me, that's just lunacy. Smartphone, this will be a fun one. Now, when we did that interview, by the way, if you ever watched that, what if you make a grand an hour? You spend an hour, it's 365 grand a year. There's obviously a point where a smartphone, because of its addictive nature and all of the ways that people can contact you, it might not just be you, it's making yourself available. Because what you're actually doing on all these chat systems is you're saying to the whole world, I'm available for free. and you are allowed to abuse my time. I bought one of these phones. Can't remember what model it was, but it only stored 50 numbers. Only 50 numbers. And when I was in bars and restaurants around the world, and people were like, oh, can we swap numbers? I was like, okay, I have to tell you something. My phone only stores 50 numbers. And I'm going to have to make a decision now whether you are stronger than the weakest person in my phone. And I did this for about a year. And you know what? People were just not offended. I was like, listen, I'm a busy guy. I only have 50 people in my phone. And if you're not stronger than the weakest person in my phone, you don't get in. And generally speaking, people were just not offended. They were like, oh, right, okay, well, am I stronger than the weakest person in your phone? No. And I just did it really to the extreme, just to see how it went. And the productivity went off the scale. Off the scale. Because you just don't waste your time with bullshit anymore. In the modern day, like the younger generation who are kind of like addicted to smartphones, it's 90% of their daily bullshit. And if you just eliminate it, you're free. It's just a very, very simple choice to make. It's very obvious when you look at it, just your messages that you get per day, that 99% of your discussions are just completely useless. They don't add value to your life. They don't make you wealthier. The other person engaging on the other side, they're not bettering their life in any way. It's So, back to the original point. Risk in the real world is totally subjective to your own personal circumstances. You can't take advantage of opportunities if your money's tied up. And you can't assess risk objectively. You need buying power. Buying power gives you freedom and objectivity. And consequently, one of the stupidest things I've seen people do on the journey of becoming wealthy is when they make their first 1 or 2 million, and then they just go and buy property for cash with that 1 or 2 million. And they're left with literally no buying power. So they're trying to get to 10 or 20 or 30 or 50, and they have to go right back to square one again, even though they own a property. So when we were talking earlier about buying your dream life for cash, you know, if you make your first million and your dream life is $1 million, you have to put it off. You need buying power. Put it off for another 5, 10 years. Get to 10, 15 million, then buy your dream life for $1 million. Don't tie your money up in assets that aren't making money. You need buying power. And compounding. Mainstream media, it's not objective. It's for ratings. And the structure is for shock value, anti-system, to get ratings, to get advertising dollars, which is the system. So it's totally hypocritical and it's a waste of your time. You've got to seek out alternative sources. Now, I can't sit here and give you a list of alternative sources because it's changing all the time. You've just got to be smart enough these days to go online and consume what is giving you facts. One thing is absolutely for certain, okay? And this is the principle of hierarchy, okay? One thing is absolutely for certain. If you can't accept facts, you will never be wealthy. Seek out facts and accept a fact as a fact. Don't waste your time. Mainstream media will just pollute you. It'll brainwash you. So in the interview, we discussed celebrity, okay? And this is a kind of a bit of a nasty slide. The youth today, I don't want to sound like an old man harping on about the youth of today. Celebrity, in terms of your own objectives, they're basically just false idols, and they're commoditized, and they're disposable commodities. Who's paying for it? You, the consumer. You buy the products from the companies that advertise, that get on the channels or whatever the channels are, that get the ratings, that have the celebrity on it. Once the celebrity is gone, once the celebrity is not getting the ratings, they're disposed of. They're totally disposable. And by the way, the vast majority of them are not rich. You know, it's like 5 years from now, where will these people be? 10 years from now. Celebrities, the best celebrities, have flashes of wealth, but they've got no idea what to do with it, and it always disappears. So that's in the best case scenario. These people are false idols. They're not role models. In fact, most of them have absolutely horrific personal lives. And the vast majority, in the best case scenario, when they make a lot of money, they blow it up anyway in some way. They always screw it up in some way. If your objective is becoming wealthy, to have self-determination, be your own person, live life on your own terms, and have the freedom, you're the opposite of what they actually are. Because what's happening with them is they're just being used and pushed around and being told what to do. They're commodities. They're disposable commodities.